Okay, game 5 here, and there's Peasant on the board with things like Rabble and Nobles and Gear. So, presumably you want to build some kind of engine. Just because teacher could manipulate piles, it means you'll have to use a bit of imagination on where you want to put your teacher tokens, of course. Big money strategies are present, but I think the Rabble really locks down any kind of big money strategy. You can pin them to having 3 green cards in their hand every single time. So I think the engine is the way to go here. How you build it is an issue, right? You need to get Peasant as early as possible because teacher is really is what will make the engine work a lot better. So opening Peasant seems standard here, or seems the right way to go here. You maybe want to do 2 Peasants. I'm not sure. You maybe want to do Gear and Peasant. That could help accelerate your Peasant upgrades. Um, you could do Guide and Peasant, which is what I end up doing here. The reason for the guide is to accelerate the upgrade of the Peasant. So I wasn't thinking clearly in the first part of this game. You want 2 Peasants, right? And I didn't pick up my second Peasant until a bit later. You'll see how that comes into play here. My opponent goes for the 2 Peasants right away, so I've said this before, I usually want 2 Peasants, one to become a teacher and one to become a disciple, at least one disciple. Throne rooms are good. But I don't get that second Peasant until much later. In fact, here, still not picking up the second Peasant, going for a Gear at this point. So just the 2 terminals, the Peasant and the Soldier, the Soldier and the Gear rather. Along with this guide here, which is going to be set aside on this thing. So none of my openers missed the shuffle, so that's good for me. And my opponent is able to upgrade one of their peasants here and comes up with another 5 coin hand here to get a Rabble. So there's this discussion on the forums. This is a strange guide here, by the way. I have a choice of what to play. I could play the Gear and set aside some things, but I rather play the Soldier and get my upgrade going as quickly as possible. Right, so there was some discussion on the forum about where to put your plus action token. The discussion on lost arts, that is. Another guide here for me just to further cycle a bit. And my opponent exchanges their second peasant there. I still haven't picked up my second peasant yet, so that has slipped my mind at this point, but I will remember eventually. Right, so back to the discussion on the plus action token. Some people are in favor of putting your plus action token on cards like Rabble, which draw, putting it on terminal draw, making it well not terminal anymore. And I can see that that seems reasonable. Honestly, to do that seems like a decent thing to do. Here's my second peasant, by the way. And that's what I had envisioned for this deck. Putting my plus action token on Rabble to get terminal draw that way. I can get additional actions from the nobles. They would serve as $6 necropolises at that point, but I mean, what can you do? If you have to do it, you have to do it, right? So my opponent was able to get the Rabble there, so they are one step closer to, you know, establishing that kind of deck where you have a lot of Rabbles and you put the plus action token on them. So here I just don't trigger that shuffle, and I have 6 after the Gear. So this time I am not going to pick up the Rabble, even though I had envisioned this Rabble thing. Instead I'm going to get the Nobles. Why? Nobles is 2 points, first of all, and it serves one of the same function as Rabble in that it draws 3 cards. So, and I didn't really think the Rabble attack would be too harsh or too difficult to deal with, right? So this is why I went for the Nobles there on 6 instead of the Rabble. I will get Rabbles eventually, but if I have 6, I'm not going to buy a Rabble over Nobles, then is what I'm saying. Anyways, back to this thing here. I use this gear to store that disciple because I know my nobles is in here, so I can throw in that thing and gain one for free. An amazing feeling. Also, the soldier is in there as well, which is from my second present, so that'll make its way up to disciple soon enough. And things are looking okay for me here, right? I can gain a nobles here and draw a lot of cards with this discipled nobles, and I'm actually ahead on getting to teacher here, ahead of my opponent, of course. So here, just going to call in the cards from the gear here and play this disciple on the nobles to first draw cards. You always want to do it this way: draw cards first, then take your actions to see if you need it. Yeah, taking the action the second time here, going to play the gear. Probably going to set aside something at this point, which will be the peasant here and the estate, right? I picked up a third peasant there because, well, it's the only source of plus buy until you could get your teacher down doing things. So I want that peasant around in my deck just for the plus buy at this point, right? Usually your main targets for teacher would be either plus card, I think that's number 1, or plus action, that's number 2. So here that Rabble just wrecks a good hand of nobles and copper and fugitives, so that's awful for me. Here I'm going to call the guide here, and this is another thing with this game, right? And there was one other game in this match, guide. When do you call guide? A lot of thought has to go into when should I call guide, when do I stop calling guides, is this hand good enough for me? So at several points throughout this game, if you're paying close enough attention, you can look and see if it was right for me to call that guide, if I was wrong of me to call the guide, things like that. But there's a surprising amount of thought that has to go into that decision. When do I call my guide? 4 here for me is a coppersmith. No trashing on board, and that coppersmith is going to make these coppers silvers and get me a lot of money that way. So a bit of payload. I know it's a bit early, and I have this habit of buying payload a little bit too early, but it's there now. Even if I can't, get all 7 coppers into silvers, if I just get 5 or 6 of them, that'll be good enough for me right now, and I can keep building my draw this way. Right now, my primary goal for building the deck here is to try to get as many nobles as possible, and then go from there with the rabbles, of course. The best way to gain nobles is through disciple, honestly, rather than paying $6 whole for it. Why would you do that? As my opponent does here, right? Called 3 guides and then comes up with the hand that, well, they were forced into because there's no more guides. And hopefully, well, it seemed like it was quite desirable getting to throw that nobles, play a rabble, then a gear, and able to buy another nobles. So here, this is the first thing for my teacher here, right? And I go for the plus action on the nobles because I want to treat it like some terminal draw thing. I have no rabbles, and I found it very difficult to put that plus action token on a pile that I had no cards from yet. So I went with the plus actions on the nobles. I could have put the plus cards on the nobles, so I would have drawn 1 card and then seen what was there and then made a more informed choice as to whether or not I want the actions or the cards there. But I went for the plus actions. This is not what I had envisaged at the start of the game. I wanted it on Rabble, but I mean the state of my deck right now, I mean, I suppose I could have put it on gear or put some other token on gear, but I mean, I thought that was the best thing to do at the time. I am not at all sure about that, especially given the game state I was in. But it is there now, and is a lot of investment to move that token, so it's kinda fixed there. This guide moves 1 bad hand into another bad hand, but at least I'm able to set aside my teacher. Here I was really hoping for my opponent to not disciple a noble, so I could do it and win the noble split, because that's a big deal for me, that these things are more than just nobles to me now with a plus action token. They can be like crossroads with no green cards in your hand if you choose the plus actions. So here my opponent does what I don't want him to do, gains the last nobles, and they put the plus action on the Rabble here, right? This is what I want to do, this is what I think is the better thing to do here. And I have another opportunity to call this teacher, and I put the plus cards on the gear at this point, because I have 2 gears in my deck. That's the only reason why I did it, because it's there in my deck. I'm going to use this gear to try to set up for my next turn, and the Peasant is here for the plus buy, and the Coppersmith comes out with a few coppers, 6 coppers I believe. So I have 13 and 2 buys, and I go for a pair of Rabbles at this point, because I mean, I thought I could deal with the attacks, but there have been some brutal Rabble attacks on me here, and I'm not too pleased about it. So I'd like my opponent to field some of these Rabbles himself. So I pick up a couple Rabbles. I should be good for actions. I think I have what these nobles are worth 3 actions now if I choose to take them for actions. I also have the flexibility to take them for cards if I like. So that's one good thing at least. I'm going to throw in that or disciple that Rabble there to gain another one. And this gear is going to save me a couple good cards for my next turn. And here I run out of actions. Actually, I'm not able to play this Coppersmith, which is very, very bad. Very, 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 very bad. And seeing this, really, I should have taken different steps at this point. The only, not the only, but a way to increase the number of actions that I have is for me to get more disciples, right? So I could have converted that peasant there, because I don't need the plus buy anymore, right? I have the teacher on him and I can call it, put plus buy on something, I'll be okay for plus buy. But I didn't convert that peasant at that point. Had I converted, I'd have gotten to another disciple more quickly, and yeah, disciple on nobles is incredible, it's great. So my opponent is able to call their teacher for a second time, and puts the coin on the nobles here instead of the action like I did, or the card anyway. They come up with 12 and 2 buys. Again, using the peasant for the plus buy here. Goes for a Coppersmith at this point and a province. So first blood has been drawn, so to speak. And now, right. So we have this turn here. I'm able to, I believe, draw through my entire deck at this point. And I call the teacher at the start of my turn to put the plus buy on the Rabbles, because I have some Rabbles, I'll be playing them, get a plus buy out of them, right? That's nice. The last thing left for me is the plus coin, which I don't know where I'll put that, probably on the Coppersmith. Not entirely sure. Anyways, this is a massive turn for me, because 1, I get money off the soldier, and 2, I get to throw in that Coppersmith, disciple that Coppersmith, and make all those coppers into golds, and I go for triple province. I don't really see what else there is to do on this board with 26 and 2 buys. Maybe I could have built more. Maybe I could have built more because I was a little bit ahead, and that would have put me in good stead for the rest of the game. But I mean, I thought the triple province was reasonable at that point. So here, not so good of a turn for me here, running out of actions. Just going to play this gear and store a couple things. Hopefully my next turn will be better. 2 here, could get peasant, could get an estate, but I don't really see the estate making much of a difference at this point. Game is approaching the end very quickly here. 4 provinces left, and there are also only a few guides left. So here, this thing is rubbish, but I have the guide on my mat, so at least I can call that and search for something much better. The Rabble attacks are starting to become more of a concern, because they're leaving me with walls of green on top of my deck, and the guide doesn't really work well. You'd have to use guide on your current hand, which may be good, but could draw into junk. And then you'd have to use guide again to get rid of the wall of green that's stacked on top of your deck. So Guide is not really the best defense against Rabble, much better against things like Militia. But I'm able to have a good turn here, going to throw in this Disciple and pick up a couple actions. That way, that's exactly what I need to see. If I'm able to see that like 2 or 3 more turns for this game, maybe just one more turn, I'll be in very, very good shape here. I'm in good shape as is, but I'll be in like very commanding shape here because my opponent is still hot on my heels here, just 6 points behind. And I have another Disciple coming up here. That Fugitive will be turned in soon. And here I'm able to play Coppersmith, and get the Teacher out on my deck. 21. But only 3 buys. If I had 4 buys, I'd have gone for those guides in a heartbeat. But I was 1 buy short. I'm not sure if I have another Rabble, but 1 buy short. Just making the most of the money here, going for double province and duchy. And then I see this hand. This great hand with 3 Rabbles and a Gear and a Copper. At first I thought it wasn't so bad because I could just call the Teacher, right? And shift my action token over to the Rabbles and we'll be happy people. And then I remembered Teacher doesn't work like that. Teacher can only put tokens on piles that don't have tokens. Which is unlike other events, like if there's Lost Arts and Pathfinder, then you could put both of them on one pile and be very nice. So my opponent finally puts plus buy on the Coppersmith here. They were constrained for most of this game because they didn't have that plus buy, having to rely solely on that Peasant. But now with the plus buy from the Coppersmith, presumably they are going to play a Disciple on it, or at least play it. They have a lot more flexibility in what they can do. So scary turn for my opponent. No, my opponent's built the better deck here with the Rabbles and the plus action. That is the way to go here for sure, and they have a lot more of the Rabbles. But still, I was out in front for most of the game, and this turn is really a difficult thing for me to swallow here. Not even being able to buy a duchy is very, very hard. I mean, I could play the Gear here and save a couple of Rabbles, but I don't really see that achieving too much. Because if my opponent has another turn like what they just had, they are going to finish the game on double province. So I go for this guide play here. Searching for I don't know what. Nothing on the first time, nothing the second time. I just show him what I have. A pair of Disciples, lonely as ever. Not even enough money to buy an estate. And yeah, that's that. This hand is not good either. I can play the nobles to draw, but my opponent is likely gonna put some green cards on top of my deck, so this turn is not looking good for me here. And my opponent actually manages to come back and close out this game, picking up the remaining duchies, I believe, and the last province or so. So that's game 5 for you here. I did get a bit tangled up with the Teacher thing, with the token of the Teachers, and my opponent did have the better deck, but a bit shafted by the luck here, I believe, at the end. What can you do? That's the game we play, right? Alright, thank you for watching, and see you in the final game.